the Italian Football Podcast.
We're going to start off with Juventus and Thiago Motta. For the first time, really, on this show, I think we have to now ask the question because his Juventus position, for the first time, really, is starting to be questioned. And we're maybe not at the stage of he's at risk of the sack, but I think we're definitely at the stage where the question needs to be asked. And in my opinion, it's warranted to ask this question now. This is Juventus. It's the biggest club in Italy, the most successful club domestically in Italy. And if you are halfway through the season, which is where we are now, basically, and you're out of the top four and you've won just 7 of your 18 Serie A games, and most importantly, which I think we'll come to in a bit, there are improvements are not being seen in some key areas, in particular the attack, then yes, I think the question needs to be asked. And I think you'd be hard pressed to find anybody that wouldn't say that, whatever side of the fence they're on, whether they're pro Motta or not. And I think it's only fair the question has to be asked. Just like it was asked, and I asked it of Allegri and Pirlo before, who were similarly struggling at this stage of their first seasons. I think the question needs to be asked. Do I think Motta should be sacked? Well, I think that's a different question altogether. There's lots to take into account with that, which we can go through now. He's 6 months into a 3-year project. It's a new project with a revolutionised squad. It's a squad that has gone from counter-attacking football for 3 years to possession-orientated football with an incredibly young team. It's the youngest team, the Juventus that have set new records for how young they are, this Juventus team, in Champions League and Serie A. If you're going to sack Motta, do you make the decision to tear that project up after 6 months? So really, where I'm at is, yes, the question absolutely should be asked, but should he be sacked? That's a different question altogether.
Yeah, that's kind of pretty much where I am too. You know my position on sacking coaches and sacking managers. I think it depends entirely on whether or not has the working relationship between the coach and the players deteriorated to the point where you can't rehabilitate it, where they can't work together anymore, where the results are so awful that it warrants that you need to break everything up. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're close to there yet. I understand. The question, should he be sacked, is a resounding no, for the reasons you outlined. I think it would be complete insanity if Juventus did that. I think it would be make Giuntoli and make the Juve leadership look like even bigger clowns and clueless than the Milan ownership and directors who did what they did against Fonseca. I think the biggest difference between Fonseca and Thiago Motta is exactly that. There were obviously some issues in the dressing room between the coach and the players from pretty much the onset. It just didn't. There was something there that they didn't work in the most harmonious way, and of course Milan are in a worse position than Juventus are. So I think that's the biggest difference between those two issues, those two instances. So no, I don't think he should be sacked. I don't think he will be sacked for the reasons I outlined. But the question whether or not
I think I agree with you. I think the only way that you can sack him now is if he has either lost the dressing room or he doesn't have either the trust and belief of his squad and the club, but the squad especially. But more so, he's not. It's been proven that the squad and he's not able to get a tune out of his squad, and that I think was clear with Milan. Coming to Milan, it was clear with Milan and Fonseca that if he hadn't lost the dressing room, he'd certainly lost the ability to influence to get what he wanted out of the squad, to make it understood, but also to have that authority and that faith of his squad, we clearly didn't have. I don't feel like we obviously you can never say for sure unless you're inside the dressing room. You can never say for sure what the situation is. But from the people I've spoken to and everything, we're not there. We're not there. There isn't that situation. He hasn't lost control of the dressing room. There are some players that are not happy with some of his training methods and how that's contributing to injuries and fatigue. But we're not. There's nobody that seems to doubt Motta's ability as a coach in general. So while that's the case, then I think that you can't make the same decision that maybe Milan were able to make because Fonseca. That wasn't the case with Fonseca.
Well, and also these things matter, not just points tally, but Milan have lost 4 games in the Serie A, Juventus have lost 0. These things are important as well. They haven't won, of course. They've won the same equal amount of games. Of course, Milan have won less game played. They've won 7, but these things matter as well, like losing games, and they haven't lost games. And defensively, they've looked more solid than Milan, but overall in games. But it doesn't mean that they've been good defensively either, because with Juve, it's been like, yes, if the defense looks good, the attack looks atrocious. But when the attack looks good, the defense is wide open. So that suggests to me that, these are more, that's a problem, of course, but it's not like with Milan, who they beat Real Madrid and then they drop points against lower teams like time and time again like that. It's just a different dynamic.
It's more inconsistent. But I would say on the defensive side, I think there's a noticeable drop off since the injury to Bremer with the defence, and then even if you look at like the last month of games, I mean, Juventus have conceded 2 goals exactly in 4 of their last 5 games now. And then before the Man City game, they also conceded 2 against Bologna. They conceded against Lecce. So we're seeing like the Juventus are consistently starting to concede now. And I think the effect of Bremer is being seen now. It's the Juventus have conceded more and more goals. So he's gonna lose that. He's got to be careful not to lose that credit as well, because that has been the one thing that's kind of held Juventus together. But yeah, I mean,
basically, what I wanted to say is basically that I think there's a really there's an important difference between what happened at Milan and Juve, and my issue is that I think if we're going to talk about Thiago Motta more specifically, I do think that the results aren't good enough. I think the results are, yes, the injury issue is a Juventus club problem, and it has been for many years. They need to look at that. You can't blame Motta for that, because it's been happening under Allegri as well. And there are several other aspects as well, important aspects that have happened under Allegri and now under Motta, such as Dusan Vlahovic, which I think is a huge important factor. Juventus, no team can have their starting number 9 be this ice cold for such a long period of time and it not have an adverse impact on their results. Maybe only Inter can, or Napoli to a much lesser extent, can get away with that because of the way that the quality they have in midfield, the quality they have in other players that can make up for that, and also other strikers, but they play differently. And same thing with Napoli, you got someone like Scott McTominay in the Conte system that excels because of the system, right? These are different things. And I think that, of course, Thiago Motta has to kind of reach that level too. But the Dusan Vlahovic situation has been a situation that has been ongoing, and I think he's saved a little bit by that. When he can't even rehabilitate Dusan Vlahovic, then there's then Juventus will be forced to act. But regardless,
just before you get to the regardless, because let's get the excuses out of the way first. The injury crisis and Vlahovic. The injury crisis, there's no doubt the injury crisis has ravaged Juventus this season. There was a period of 2 months, kind of in November end of October, November into December, where Juventus only had like a couple of outfielders on their bench for long stretches of those 2 months.
Yeah, I
I
remember.
mean, Juventus have lost their best player for the whole season in Bremer. They haven't been able to put a senior backline out for stretches this season. People forget that Savona was a next-gen player at the beginning of the season. He was rushed into the team because of lack of options, and he just kind of stayed there, and he's done well. But
Well, that's another thing as well. That,
so the point I'm making is, and then they've had one striker, if you can call him a striker, Vlahovic, for the first half of the season. One completely let's be honest, useless striker to play for the entire season. Now, that is going to massively impact any manager. But it's easy to overlook because that's what happens. Once injuries happen, after a couple of months, a few months, people forget that you're without your best player for the whole season, and they just forget about it. And as if it doesn't matter, So we do that. I mean, I'm just going through the excuses here. We'll get to the where he's failing in a second. But that would affect any manager, especially a manager that's just starting at a new team with all the revolution that's taken place with changing the style, changing so many new players, having the youngest team in the league. That would affect anybody. I think
But that's the thing, though. That's what I wanted to say. I think that's also the saving grace. Mbangula, Savona, Yildiz. The fact that he is making young players look good and improving. Nobody expected Mbangula and Savona to have the impact they had. Yildiz was an unwritten card. Great talent, but he was unwritten. You see that with Thiago Motta, and that's kind of, if he continues on with what he did at Bologna as well, the sense that he can improve young players, and as long as he can improve young players, and as long as young players respond to him, then his tenure at Juve won't be in called.
But I do have to come back on that, Nima.
Wait, let me finish. Until the results in the Serie A become out of the top four, then they have to act. But I don't think we're there yet. I don't think Juventus are going to finish outside the top four. But if we go to the other side of it, there is lots of cause for concern. And the game against Milan in isolation doesn't mean much, but it's a expression of a tendency that we've seen pretty much since match day 4-5 onwards in the Serie A until today, and that is that Juventus can't kill off games. Juventus are in control of games, but in the second half or in the middle of the second half fall apart and lose complete control and lose complete ability to control games. That is a concern. That is where Thiago Motta has failed more than anything.
Well, I think that's true, but I think it's the reason why they can't kill off games is because they don't create enough chances, and they can't, and so they're not going to score a second goal. That is the big problem, and that is the biggest concern. That's the only real concern I have with Motta, because this has been a constant throughout the season. And you said since game 4. I would say even from game 1. I mean, the 3-0 win over Como and the 3-0 win over Verona. If you look at the XG in that game, they way overshot their XG. They had a 1.31 XG against Como. They had a 1.36 XG against Verona, and I think wasn't one of them a penalty in that game. I think one of the goals was a penalty, if I'm not mistaken, in that Verona game. So even in those matches, they outperformed their actual XG. This has been a constant all season, basically. Juventus do not create enough chances, and this is where it is a serious problem, because we are not seeing an improvement in the chance creation, the goal scoring. Yes, there are a lot of reasons for this, which I've gone through: the injury crisis, the fact you've only got one subpar striker that clearly doesn't fit Motta's system, the fact that Nico Gonzalez has barely been fit at all. Yildiz is 19 years old and is going to be inconsistent at that age. Of course, these are all reasons. But even when these players have been available, as they were, most of them were available in the Milan game. Nico's not fully fit, and Conceição gets an injured before the game. But even when he's had most of the offensive players available, we're still not seeing enough of a chance creation. Against Milan, they barely created anything. The only real big chance they had was the chance for Vlahovic
I
at
think
1-0.
I
They're
think
not creating enough chances. And because we're not seeing an improvement, for me, that is where Motta's future is most at risk, because we're not seeing an improvement.
Well, that's what I was going to get to. I think the lack of chance creation is a combination of both Motta's inability structurally as a coach to how to create teams that create enough, and also because I think so far between Koopmeiners, Douglas Luiz, sorry, might as well be David Luiz, Douglas Luiz and Nico Gonzalez, that's 130 million euros, which to this date, on the 6th of January, has been a complete waste of money.
Yeah, that's the other area I
And
was going to say.
that's what I was
That's
going to
damning.
get. Wait, let me finish. My issue here is Thiago Motta. Yes, the chance creation can be a problem if you don't have strikers who can help you out, blah blah blah. But the problem is the midfield isn't creating enough. This isn't a striker issue as such. This is more a structural issue with Motta. That's what he was able to do when he was at Bologna because of players like Calafiori, because of players like Zirkzee. There was who broke the patterns of games because of the kind of characteristics they had, whether it was hold up play and link up play with Zirkzee or running and breaking the lines and press with Calafiori. They were able to mask a lot of that. And also it's Bologna. Teams aren't going to defend as deeply against you, right? But here I do see a structural problem in Thiago Motta's the way that he builds and structures, and that is he knows how to position teams to get out and it looks good in safe spaces. I've said this before, but as soon as they get near the opposition's penalty area, the creativity, the plan flatlines. There doesn't seem to be any structure in place for the final third, and that is on Motta. Now, some of that you can kind of say, well, that's the midfield, all three of them, the midfield trio should help out, right? And someone like Kefren Thuram has in recent games shown an ability to kind of, mask up for that. But it doesn't change the fact that Luis Koopmeiners is just not working.
No, that's damning. Koopmeiners and Douglas Luiz, and but it's not just on Motta. That's also on Giuntoli.
Without a doubt.
There's also, there needs to be a real proper investigation into the Koopmeiners
Well, they need to do an
and
analysis.
Douglas
What's
Luiz.
going
Yeah,
on?
because that is damning. Koopmeiners, he's persisting, and this is Christian. He keeps persisting with Koopmeiners as a number 10. It's clearly not working. Whether that's also because Vlahovic is so useless, and that's not helping him. If and when Xerxes comes in, whether suddenly Koopmeiners starts playing well as a number 10, is clearly not working. And the fact, and this is my other criticism of Motta, the fact that he keeps persisting, it's a cliche, but the definition of insanity, as has been repeated so many times, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting things to change. We're just going round and round and round in circles with Motta. The same. It's like the famous scene from Squid Game with that song that everybody keeps be playing in the last week, of them going round and round in circles. Jiro Jiro Dondo song, the Korean song. Like, he just goes round and round in circles, the same thing over and over and over again, and it's the same tune all the time. And he's still persisting with it when it's clearly not working. Why is he persisting with Koopmeiners as a number 10? It's not working. So he needs to change something. Whether it goes to a 4-3-3 and plays Koopmeiners deeper, whether you just play Koopmeiners in the double pivot, I don't know. Why are you playing Koopmeiners as a 10? It's not working. He was abysmal against Milan. He was the only player on the pitch. The only player on the pitch was worse than him was Vlahovic. That Vlahovic performance against Milan was so bad. It was embarrassing. It was absolutely. Matteo Bonetti, check his Twitter feed. He did a compilation of his game. Like the most basic controls, the most basic 6-yard passes that he was getting wrong. The ball was coming to him, and he was tried to trap it, and it went under his foot. I mean, it was like watching a Sunday League donkey after that's drunk from the night before. That's how bad, embarrassing how bad Vlahovic is. I mean, you know. I
No,
don't know.
the
I don't know what to.
Vlahovic.
Yeah, I
No,
don't know
the
what to say
Vlahovic
about
thing
Vlahovic.
is like it's not just even sitters anymore. It's not just. It's it's not him just missing sitters. It's not the fact that he can't make simple passes. It's genuinely awful at every level. He looks mentally off as well, which can happen. You know, things can become at one environment. It doesn't work out, and you leave and go somewhere else, and it just works for you because you find in a place where you're happy and you're enjoying yourself. And sometimes life just doesn't work out in certain places. But if we're talking from a football technical point of view, the issues are still the same. He can't play with his back against the ball, with his back against the goal. He can't link up. His passing, his ability to put others into play to help him is atrocious. His attitude just off. And
I have to stick up for Motta here with Vlahovic because I've seen a lot of criticism for Motta for taking off Vlahovic midway through the second half against Milan when Juventus are 1-0 up at that time, and then Juventus end up losing 2-1, and people kind of trying to put the two together that taking Vlahovic off Juventus, is what cost Juventus the game and blah blah blah. Did anybody watch the 65 minutes that Vlahovic put in? That's probably the worst performance I've seen from Vlahovic in a Juventus shirt, and there are a lot of contenders for worst performance. Let me tell you that it was absolutely horrendous. I can't anybody that watched that game and tell me that they wouldn't have taken Vlahovic off, even if you've got no striker on the bench. He was so bad. Every single ball that came to him, he lost. So I'm sorry, I cannot criticise Motta for taking Vlahovic off in that game. It's unfortunate that we've had a whole first half of the season where he's had no other striker to use, and that's on Giuntoli. That's not on Motta. Motta has been criticised for taking him off too much.
I think that's the right thing to do, and I think when it's not working, when you've tried everything else, because again, there's context here. Allegri tried everything with him too, and it just didn't work. It looked somewhat better. He had 15 goals last season in the Serie A, but the fact that this guy can't play with his back against the goal in a single a 1 number 9 system is a Vlahovic problem.
You can't even control the ball, Nima, let alone hold the ball up. You can't even control it.
It's and this has been going on for a long time now. The only time
he's a lost cause, Nima. Let's just say what it is. He's gone. He's done.
This is the thing. When he was at Fiorentina, they were a side that attacked the space, and he scored a lot when he was faced towards goal. But when you play for the biggest sides, regardless in Italy, Spain, Germany, England, you're going to have to learn to play with your back against the goal in order to succeed. And the only time that someone like Romelu Lukaku was world class was when he was under Antonio Conte, because he taught him how to do that. Vlahovic has had 2 coaches now, who one established coach, one new up and coming, who evidently can work with young players and improve players. Both of them can't seem to get him to do it. He can't control the ball. He can't seem to do it. And that is a Vlahovic problem. That's not an Allegri problem. That's not a Motta problem. That's a Vlahovic problem. And that needs to be taken care of, in the sense that I've been on the fence because I wanted to give him time. But at this point, I think it's time to get rid of him.
I think that's obvious. The problem is
I think they have to get rid of him. I think it's just not.
When Nicola Skira is saying there's a possibility that he could even go this month, I think if the opportunity is there to get rid of him in January, I would get rid of him. But then you have to bring someone in, and that brings us on to the January transfer window. Because if you get rid of Motta, which I don't think is going to happen, but if you get rid of Motta, it has to be now, right now, today, tomorrow, before you sign players. Because if you're going to bring in players that are Motta players, like Xerxes, for example, who Juventus are in talks for at the moment, then there's no point bringing in Xerxes and then sacking Motta in 2 weeks, and then another coach comes in and it ends up being like at Man United where the coach doesn't want him. You bring in players for Motta. So if you're going to stick with Motta, then you stick with him and you bring in players that work for his system. And Xerxes is one of those players. And with regards to that, comes in nicely with Vlahovic. With Xerxes, I think he can help a lot. He can help to link the game up, to hold the ball up, to bring others into play, to make the other attackers and the midfielders that are going to be attacking forward, to make them better and to create more for them and hopefully get them to score more goals. Will he score more than Vlahovic? No, I think he'll score less than Vlahovic. Vlahovic does still have 12 goals this season somehow. I know a few of them are penalties. Vlahovic does still have 12 goals in all competitions, which, means he'll probably end the season with 24, 25 goals in all comps, which isn't actually that bad. But it masks the other problems that Zirkzee will hopefully solve. So whether or not, this is going to solve Juventus's goal scoring issues, 30 goals in 18 Serie A games is simply not good enough. XG of 29 is not good enough. Will Zirkzee solve that? I don't know. I can't say for certain that he will. I think he will make the team play better, though. And that will make Juventus better.
I think there's two aspects to the Zirkzee discussion. We know that Thiago Motta can get fantastic levels out of Joshua Zirkzee. There's no doubt about that. We've seen that. I think that he works better in a Motta system? Yes, of course he does, because the number 9 in the Motta system is a midfielder almost. You have to, they like to compact and overload the central midfield and then have dynamic midfielders and wide players who can help out to create numerical advantages and create more chances. Like, I think absolutely Zirkzee works better than that. I even think that in terms of goal scoring, he's not I can't remember if Zirkzee took penalties at Bologna, but regardless,
no, he didn't. I think maybe he took one, maybe.
Yeah. But regardless, I think he's more important for the overall play, and I think he's still a young player, and he can maybe become. He's the kind of player, Zirkzee, that I think he's the kind of striker that usually that kind of a striker, they hit their goal scoring peak from 28, 29 onwards. But regardless, my concern about the Zirkzee transfer is we're talking about a player who's been pretty mentally abused at Manchester United. How broken is Zirkzee if he were to come to Juve? And can Juve afford to rehabilitate him and give him the time to rehabilitate him? That's what my concerns with Zirkzee is. Not that he would work under Motta or in Serie A or at Juve or anything like that.
Well, Juventus have to do something. I think it's pretty clear. You cannot go your second half of the season with Vlahovic, just Vlahovic, as your striker. Milik, who's had another little injury problem, doesn't. He's going to be out for still a while longer. And when he comes back, he would have been out for pushing on a year. So I mean, that's obviously ridiculous. So they need to sign someone, and Zirkzee seems to be available. But Giuntoli has to prove himself. Obviously he needs to sign.
Another thing.
He needs to sign defenders. So far, his overall transfer market has failed. Some of his transfers have worked and been good. Like Kalulu's been really good. Conceição, I think, has shown enough to show that he can have he's going to be an important player for Juventus going forward. Some of his transfers, Thuram, I think, has been good. Di Gregorio, even though he was terrible against Milan, I think he's been pretty good. So I mean, there has been success stories there. Even Cabal was good until he got the injury, and that's unlucky. You can't blame Giuntoli for that. But also, there has been some huge failures, especially Luiz and Koopmeiners, for the money that was spent.
Those were the big signings. Those were the big financial undertakings in the summer, and they've both missed.
And the gaps that he did, and the gaps that he didn't solve, like going into the season with just Vlahovic, having to spend the first half of the season with just Vlahovic as your only striker, that's unforgivable. That's a huge failure, the biggest failure of all.
And that's also part of the reason that I wanted to bring that up. And I think that Giuntoli is very capable. I think he's good at what he does. I think we should give him time too, but the buck has to stop with him. He's the one who's responsible for the sporting project. He's the one who's responsible for the structure of this new Juve. And although there are positives, there are also very, very big failures and negatives. And the buck has to stop with him. He has to take responsibility for that. Does that mean he has to leave? Of course not. That's stupid. Let's remember that Marotta failed in his first year and a half or two at Juve as well. It took some time. Yeah, it took some time for Juve under Marotta to things to settle down, for things to, go into gear. So I think we should give Giuntoli this season, but I'm looking at it from next season that he can't afford, already in January, if they're going to do something, they can't afford to F this up.
Well,
He can't afford to
I'm
mess
critical of
this up.
Giuntoli already because for January already. I have to be honest. We're January the 6th now. Now Bremer done his ACL in October. When was it? Beginning of October. I mean, he's had like pushing on 3 months now to prepare and plan to get in a replacement for Bremer. Then of course you had the Cabal injury as well, which was what, November, beginning of November. So that's 2 months. We shouldn't be here now at the 6th of January, and it's completely unclear as to who Juventus are going to sign at centre back. There was Tomori, there was Hanchko from Feyenoord, there was the Benfica guy Antonio Silva. Tomori, since the change around that doesn't look like it's going to happen because Conceição's come in. Hanchko's probably too expensive at the moment. Antonio Silva probably too expensive. We shouldn't be in a situation with January the 6th. And the biggest criticism I have is that Juventus have made a decision as a club, and this is through Giuntoli, to completely freeze out Danilo. Juventus are already completely massively understaffed, even with Danilo, who I'm not a fan of. I think he's finished as a top player, and he's not good enough. But you should not be freezing out one of your few bodies in January already. So he won't play again now for Juventus. You should not be freezing out Danilo, ready to sell him when you don't have a replacement already in place. So Juventus have had to play the Super Cup, and now they're going to have to play the Turin Derby, and they've got 3 huge tough games coming up after that. They don't even have one defender. They need 2 defenders in January, maybe 3 if you're getting rid of Danilo. Probably yes, almost certainly you need 3 defenders. If you get rid of Danilo, you need an extra defender. So that's 3 defenders. They haven't brought anyone in, and it's complete. And it doesn't seem like any negotiations. I mean, I might be wrong. They might bring 2 players in tomorrow, but it doesn't look like there's any negotiations that are going on that are close to bringing in a player or 2 or 3. And you've just frozen out Danilo, so you've got even less options now in defence. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's just do not do that. Why do you freeze out Danilo? Keep playing him, then sell him once you've got someone in. I mean, I have to be critical of Giuntoli. He's had 3 months, 2 months and 3 months to plan for this. They should have already had someone in already by now. At least one defender should have been signed or very, very close to signing. And we're being told, well, they're in the final negotiations, blah, blah, blah. We're not even close to that. So I'm sorry, but I'm not impressed by the way Giuntoli started this January market either. He needs to get moving, and he needs to prove himself fast because Juventus have coming up Torino away, Atalanta away, Milan home, Napoli away. That's their next 4 games in Serie A. Then they have Inter in the middle of February as well. Now, Juventus are 3 points off 4th place right now. After this run of games, with the options, lack of options in defence I'm talking about, with the problems in attack, with the form that they're in, I mean, they could be out of the top 4. They could be 7, 8, 9 points behind if they're if things go badly in those games. Giuntoli should have moved by now. We should have players in already now. So I'm not happy with Giuntoli the way he started this journey. He needs to get moving.
Yeah, no, he does. He absolutely does, and it's been pretty damning that he already that he hasn't, especially with Cabal and Bremer gone and Danilo, pushing Danilo. I get why you want to push Danilo out, but like you said, he's had a couple of months to do it, and it doesn't look like he's doing much. But then we've seen these Tomori links. I mean, I'm not, let's wait and see what happens. But yeah, I'm not too impressed with what he's done. I think but again, like I said, I give him this season because last season was not a real season. They couldn't do anything because of the blowback after Paratici. So this is the first season I think he's really we can judge him on. But he has to start getting it right already this January. So we'll see what happens by the end of January. But I do think that there's plenty of blame to go around, and I think there's been mistakes made. The question is, of course, are these mistakes irreparable? I don't think they are. I think they're more than reparable. And of course, where do you go? I don't think it's time to blow that project up yet. I don't think we're there yet. But I do think that serious questions need to be asked. And Thiago Motta has to start to deliver tactically, especially in the final third, regardless of who the players are. Because players are playing. Of course, the quality of players matter. But when things flatline and consistently flatline for half a season, as soon as you approach the opposition's third, there is a problem. It's not just a personnel issue. It's a tactical issue. And that is where I think Motta has failed. And I think it's right to criticize and question him.